4 minutes of opening remarks. And you see what happens now. So let me give you a bit of introduction. So this first session, of course, is about the need for transforming education. May I request all of you, whenever you have time, our previous chairs who spoke, their LinkedIn profile, and also the LinkedIn profile of these people, you must go through it. It is very inspiring. You can connect with them. You can ask your questions to them. That is the whole idea. If the digital world is transformative in its own right, that transformation has to be put into action, which Professor Rajan said. And the first action is that how do you connect with these people? So I have great pleasure introducing Mr. Francis, a great educator, influencer, and youngsters who are here. You may find him on Twitter, if you are on Twitter, and you can learn a lot of things from here. Another very eminent professor from Baroda University. He heads the Management and Education Department. Dr. Tony Devine, I have already spoken, so I'm not going to say more about him, though you have a lot of things to be said about.
The need for transformation, not only in a particular sector, whether you talk about economic sector, education, health, but a personal transformation is a very, very important thing, especially in the 21st century. Why? Because the human intellect has crossed beyond its own limits. Now it is the human beings to adopt and be familiar and be comfortable with all kinds of developments that are taking place. So the National Education Policy 2020 clearly states that we wish to become the global knowledge power. And the global knowledge power is not only in academics, not only in the knowledge domain, but also in the domain of personal transformation. If I put you some examples, you know Gautam Buddha, the entire life was transformed. And if you understand how this transformation took place, he was the princess of a rich king. And he was not seeing any kind of miseries. And the moment he understood, he came out and he saw how the world is all about. And a sudden critical reflection took place in the mind. And his life got transformed, absolutely transformed. And how an unknown lawyer has transformed into a father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi. So friends, we need to believe that transformation is not restricted to certain people. Transformation is possible to everyone. What is required is how this transformation can be welcomed, can be practiced, and can be seen in our own lives. And education plays a very, very important role. And usually somebody talked in the morning that change happens in life. And sometimes this change at one point actually takes us in the wrong direction, that we are actually in the line of transformation. But the transformation is not change at one point, but the transformation is the trajectory of the changes. And how these changes are reshaping our thinking, our thought process, our actions, and ultimately how it is impacting us and also the greater society. Therefore, transformation requires what are the goals that we are pursuing for. And today we are talking about education, and we are talking about a child-centered education, and we are using the word child-friendly education. You know, the child-centered education, child-friendly education are not simple words. They carry a deep philosophical meaning. The moment we talk about child-friendly education, what it means? It means creating a great sense of comfort. It means the elimination of the fear. I think these are the two essential components for any education system that we are looking for. Education can only happen, learning can only happen when there is a great degree of comfort. And the comfort actually brings the peace. The comfort brings the harmony. And the peace and harmony are essential attributes for the learning journey. And the second important aspect is the elimination of fear. The fear of learning is dominating in the education sector. And the fear is dominating because of the projects, the various aspects that we do in the name of education. Promoting competition. I think thereby an element of fear that is dominating in the system. So friends, what is required for education to be transformed is to create that kind of environment where there is a reflective thinking, a fearless ideas, and also a goal that they are pursuing with the adequate capabilities and to realize. And that's how the Nobel laureate says, when you look for development, whether you talk about personal development, social development, the development is especially the institutions that we have created. The development is the creation of aspirations in people, which is a very, very important thing. We need to create aspirations as the institutions of learning. And not only creating aspirations, but we also enable people to accomplish those aspirations. I think that is the kind of a strategy through which we can bring transformation to education. I conclude by recalling our famous Nobel laureate, Rabindranath Tagore. He talks a wonderful lines. He says, where the mind is without fear and head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Friends, this is what the kind of a world that we are looking for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please keep it to yourself. The need for transformation, what triggers it, what are the essential individuals to do that transformation. You touched on all of them, but we'll come back to that. So may I now invite our friend Mr. Francis, educationist, mentor, collaborator, school turnaround expert and TEDx speaker, to put forth his view in his opening remark next 45 minutes. Mr.
And it's a great opportunity to come here today, and the morning session I have learned a lot. I hope we have a live feed for capturing and sharing that more. My journey, what I'm going to spend time in this 4 minutes is to talk about my journey, for you to understand that how a normal student, right? I was a very average student in school. I never enjoyed my school learning. I did not enjoy my college learning, and that's a fact. And I never got an opportunity to go to the stage yet in my school because it was so crowded. The classroom was like, it was like a mad rush. There was a rat race to who reaches where. And of course, sometimes as adults, we have a system where, you know, you're picked and chosen right in a classroom. I was in a classroom of 90 students in one classroom. I mean, when we have a lunchtime, we could smell all types of food in the room. And that's been my personal mission in life. That how do you challenge, like we spoke about, some of the speakers spoke about challenging the system. It's very, very difficult to challenge the system, very difficult. I mean, so every time when I see a system, when I see a structure, I think that how can we come together, collaborate and challenge the system? It's very easy to die comfortable, very easy. I mean, I was, in my career, I grew to be a CEO of a large chain of schools. We had almost 150 schools across the country. And then one day I realized that, am I dead? Because I was so comfortable, you know, and you're not challenging anything, you're just going with the flow. And you're so much isolated that there is no room for improvement. If you get isolated, there's no room for improvement. I just left, I just resigned. And I came back to the ground level, setting up schools in smaller towns. So it's very, I mean, my family keeps cornering me for these decisions ever. But it's very difficult because you get to a level, come back. I mean, I was very, very keen that, yeah, we run private schools, we work with private schools, but where do the policies come from? I mean, we don't know where the policies come from. So how do you, instead of blaming the system, can you be a part of the system? I did my best, and fortunately, I was very blessed that I got very, very close to working in several policies in the government of Maharashtra. This was a few years back. And there was one idea which came up that how do you, and this is much before NEP, where regional language, now we talk about regional language, other tongue. This was years back where there was an idea by the education minister saying that can we start an education board keeping Marathi as a medium. I still remember journalists quietly going and checking that is this really working or is the government just saying? But they were shocked the kind of response which parents were having. Because sometimes you have to move away from your existing system. So we moved away from the existing state board. We said if we are in the state board, everything will be, we'll have to fit into that system. So we moved away. But what happened? When we challenged the system, we did well, 3 years, 100 schools, governments changed, the board was shut. So what I'm trying to say is, but we didn't stop challenging. There are, you challenge, you are finally, sometimes you're beaten down. Because, and then of course when the board was shut down, there was a lot of protest later on from the parents and everyone talking that why it should have been continued. And then the NEP came, which spoke about it, and it went on. So what I'm trying to say is, as human beings, as we know that how education has to be, is important, right? We know, I attend so many conferences, I hear so many things happening, but on the ground, we have to go it and do it ourselves in the ground. You have to be a role model. You have to challenge and you have to get into the situation. Another example I just want to quickly share, very similar, where there was a proposal to pass an act in the government of Maharashtra to introduce Marathi as a compulsory subject in all the schools in Maharashtra. And so the act was being passed, so we went to the minister and said, can we do it better? Can we just go to the education boards, talk to them, bring them together, and can we then roll it out instead of just like passing an act and everyone has to follow it? Fortunately, we were heard and went to all the 4 education boards, convinced them, brought exemptions, picked up ideas from the board that what should be allowed, what should not be allowed. Is learning important or assessment of a language important? Learning of the language is more important than just getting into mastery. Today, I'm very proud to say that even an Ivy school and Cambridge schools in Maharashtra, who does not have a framework for Marathi language, teaches Marathi in their school. You have to challenge the system.
Here, I have some slides, so maybe we can show the first slide. While it's coming up, I'll just move forward here. So when we look at the current education system, the focus is very much on the transmission. So next slide is very much on the focus of the acquisition and transmission of knowledge. There's less emphasis on skills. There's less emphasis still on relationships, and there's very little emphasis on cultivating good character and values. So this is not a transformative education system, it's a transactional educational system. Next slide. I was at the United Nations Transforming Education Summit back in September. We were there for 3 days. It just preceded the General Assembly. We spent 3 days talking about all different types of parts of the education area that needs to be transformed. And I think what's going on globally is that we are putting most of the emphasis on trying to solve downstream problems, trying to solve the symptoms, right, rather than the cause. So next slide. the most essential area of transformation is not all these other areas. They're not essential. It is the human beings, the educators themselves. That's all of us here in the room here, right? We need to show up as a new person every single day. I want you all to write down something, because the success of this conference here today will depend on one thing and one thing only: the commitment by each one of us sitting in this room to transform one thing about ourselves. Take out your notepad and your pen and write down, I will work on transforming this one thing, and I will work on it for the next 30 days. So do that right now while I'm speaking, okay? Then we can be successful. When we transform ourselves, then the culture of our educational institutions are transformed. And guess what? That's how students are transformed, right? Because they actually calibrate off the teachers. They're always watching the teachers, the educators. And that is how then we can get the real result we're after, which is preparing students to be successful for a living and a life, and for the future. Next. The most essential area of transformation is to understand that in today's world, less orientation comes to you from the outside, and more needs to come from yourself. And in fact, learning, right? Learning is no longer about teaching something, but is helping you to build a reliable moral compass to help you find your way through this complex, volatile, and ambiguous world. Next. And that is why in Global Peace Foundation, for the past decade, we've been driving character and creativity development, putting an emphasis on character. And trust me, this area of character is going to be absolutely, I think, a focal point as we go forward into the 21st century. That is the differentiator that allows a person to be really successful in any endeavor that they may find themselves in. So we're going to be doing a lot of development work on that. Next slide. What is character? It is to know the good, love the good, and do the good. We need that action component, doing the good, right? Habits of the mind, habits of the heart, and habits of action. Next. So I showed you a slide in the beginning of a transactional educational system. This is a transformative education system where the foundational work is cultivating character and values. And that in turn has to guide us to actually make good relationships. We need a lot more collaboration. We need to get along with people from different backgrounds, from different parts of our educational institutions. We need to break down the wall between the school and the community, engage the parents. We need to be really, really good at relationships, more than ever before. And then skills, creativity, resilience, communication, collaboration. We need to be really good at that. And finally, knowledge. It's not the acquisition of knowledge, but the application of knowledge. That was the great thing about the Sustainathon Leaphops Challenge at Mona Rochdale University yesterday, where 50 teams came up with ideas to solve real Indian problems. It's not theoretical, it's real world stuff, right? Next slide. And I'm so glad to see different agencies. We contribute to the OECD Education 2030 project, and it focuses on this. What are the values, attitudes, skills, and new knowledge that we need to be focusing on so that students can be successful in the 21st century? So next slide. Educators also have to be moral leaders, putting their focus on the life arc of the student rather than an emphasis on final exams, and be that mentor as well. Next slide. And our educators need to be innovative leaders, to be designers of learning, and be bottom-up innovators rather than just transmitters of knowledge. So next. I was on the C20 Education and Digital Technologies webinar last night. Global Peace Foundation is working in collaboration with the C20 on the education area, and they asked me to share 3 policy recommendations. So these are the 3 recommendations I shared last night. Number 1, invest in transformative competencies, particularly character and values, a growth mindset, skills and relationships, and the application of new knowledge. Number 2, aligning educational curriculum with all levels to match societal and workforce needs. There's a huge mismatch, as we know. We need to actually shorten that mismatch. And finally, an ecosystem approach. The education sector is too much in a silo from the rest of society. We need a lot more input from industry, from civil society organizations. It has to be a collaborative effort. Next slide. I really like, our collaboration with the C20. Alma talks about that education should be an education for life, in addition, of course, to be an education for living, right? And I really would like to encourage you to connect in with the Education and Digital Transformation Working Group, and particularly the Education for Life and Global Citizenship subgroup. So I have the link here. We encourage you all to do that. And then next slide to finish. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is prepare students to create a peaceful and flourishing 21st century civilization. Every sector of civilization has to be transformed, right? So we need transformed students going out there, transforming the world, and making this world, once and for all, 21st century, the most peaceful.
The first round, they said something which was provocative. Yes, I'm so sorry. Is our international speaker online? Pujita, can you confirm? Welcome. Hello. Can you hear us, ma'am?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, so Margarita, thank you. She is Director of the International Cooperation Office at the Department of Education, Philippines. We are missing you here in this hall, ma'am, but so nice of you. You could join us from there. If you are listening in the first segment, we have invited all the speakers to give their opening remarks, 4 to 5 minutes, but you can take a couple of minutes more because you are a long distance away from here. So over to you, Margarita.
Thank you very much to stay.
When we talk about education for cooperation, even Dr. Margarita talked about, what is required for education is cooperation, collaboration, and solidarity, not the competition. But the educational practices that we see at large are more or less promoting through their actions a great degree of competition between the learners, between the institutions. And today, when you talk about the international testing, you talk about PISA, Program for International Student Assessments, or the national assessment rankings. There is a kind of a competitive environment which is good to develop to have some kind of benchmarks to the institutional growth and development. But the impact is absolutely in a very, very unfortunate way.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप जी की हमें आए फाउंडेशन अग्निवेश जी हैं, उनकी परंपरा को गुरु जी आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं।